So good afternoon. So my phone lost storage, so that's why now we have part 1 and part 2 for the lesson 3. So we'll just be continuing the lesson. So we stopped at video, so we will start with the video.
Judge from how they reacted to whether this was too much or not enough, and you can move on and do the next thing.
Jeannie was making amazing progress. As the experts looked on, they realized that she might be the answer to the question that had troubled science for so long.
So we seized this wonderful opportunity that she provided us in as loving a way as we could, but using it to finally get our chance to address head-on specific hypotheses and notions about human language and the human mind.
These hypotheses were based on the latest ideas about how children's brains developed. According to the theory, young children could only learn certain things at certain times, called critical periods. Language was one of these critical periods, and according to the theory, Jeannie, who was now a teenager, had missed her chance forever. But incredibly, Jeannie seemed to be proving the theory wrong. As this footage shows, Jeannie was blossoming. Not only was she delighted by the world around her, but she was learning the words for the new things she was seeing.
She was extremely interested in everything around her. She wanted to know the word for everything around her. She wanted to engage people all around her. She was not mentally deficient. Her lights were on, and everyone who worked with her, from teachers to therapists to me, knew that she was not retarded. It was clear as day.
Okay, so before we continue, so what happened is that the world found out about Jenny, and so the government itself funded a research, not just to help Jenny, but also a research in order, again, to answer or to find out whether the different hypotheses concerning language development, language or even a child's development are true or not. So now, it seems that the different theories, or before we go there, so there are different theories, and one of those theories is the, as stated, critical period hypothesis. It was stated in the video about the critical stages, and according to that theory, Jenny, as a teenager already, has missed her chance to learn language. Why? Because in one of those critical periods also is learning language, and she missed that period. But it seems that Jenny was proving the hypothesis wrong, because she being curious, she being willing to learn, is helping her develop. Not only she is being developed by the scientist, or the scientist is helping her develop, but she herself wants to learn or is excited to learn. Remember, we individuals are curious beings. We people are very curious people. That's why we have the saying, curiosity kills the cat. So we are very curious about things. And so she is very curious about the new things around her. So remember, her whole life during those 13 long years is just a bed, a window that she cannot even look on, a cage, and a toilet seat. And also her father, or her torturer, depends on you. Okay, and so now being shown to the different things around the world, around her, she is very curious and showing great progress. And according to the different teachers, scientists, caretakers, psychologists that were around her, researching her or caring for her, she is not retarded. Hindi siya bobo. she is quite intelligent too. Now, remember that the key concept or key point that she was not retarded. Okay, continuing.
And as she began to learn more and more words, hundreds of words, much more rapidly than I ever imagined, and stringing them together, I began to think maybe I will be wrong. Maybe she will be the one that will prove that this hypothesis is incorrect.
But Jeannie could not escape the effects of her past so easily. She was still haunted by her traumatic upbringing, trapped by the memories of the awful fate she had suffered. And linguistically, she had stopped making progress.
She learned tons of words. She has an enormous vocabulary. But language is not words. Language is grammar. Language is sentences. How do you make a sentence? What can be a sentence? What is a sentence? How do you automatically know something's a sentence?
Okay. So as the scientist says, she was developing, growing rapidly. She was learning many things, learning many words, and even combining those words. But in the end, she stopped developing linguistically or in the terms of linguistics. As the scientist said, language are not words only. Or words, when you speak a word, it does not mean that you are speaking a language. Language are sentences. Language are grammatically correct sentences in order to convey messages. So meaning to say, even though Jenny learned a lot of words, but because she was not able to construct proper sentences, then she stopped developing in terms of linguistics. Now remember, in your childhood, let's go back to first language acquisition. Remember in your childhood, no one taught you how to speak in Tagalog in complete sentences. You were just there, learning from others. Oh, hi, kamusta po kayo? Ito yung bagong lesson natin, mga ganon. No one taught you how to speak like that. What did you learn in school? Or what is paksa? Or what is the subject? What is the verb? So you just learned and identified what do we call those specific words. But in learning Tagalog or learning the mother tongue, did anyone teach you how to speak in complete sentences? No, no one. We just acquired it. We just learned it by observing others and understanding the things around them or around us. And that is something that Jenny did not learn because all her life, all her 13 years, she was locked up. And even earlier, if you still remember the sentences, so father take piece wood, hit cry, Jenny hungry, and so on and so forth. So she was mixing words. She was putting different words in order. But they are not complete sentences. Or they are not sentences. They are just words. Although they have meaning, they're not still complete sentences. And if they are incomplete sentences, if there is a wrong word, either really it's a wrong word to be used, you have a very small word bank, or you just pronounce it wrong, then there is a different message. For example, read, read. Similar spelling, but pronounce it in a different way, it has a different meaning. The other one is already performed in the past. Okay. So, continuing.
So it wasn't because she was cognitively deficient. In other respects, it was because she was cognitively deficient in this island of human mind, the mental faculty that we call grammar.
At the time Jeannie was found, brain science was in its infancy. But today, we have a much clearer picture of what actually happens in cases of extreme neglect like Jeannie's.
In Jeannie's brain, the left part of her brain, her cortex, that has those neural systems responsible for speech and language, because she never heard any words and because she was never spoken to very often, they didn't get stimulated. And because they weren't stimulated, they got smaller and less functional and disconnected, and ultimately that part of the brain literally physically changes.
Today, with modern imaging technology, we can actually see what happens in the brains of feral children, and the effects are shocking. Without normal stimulation, their brains are smaller and malformed.
Okay. So, remember, Jenny was not retarded. Hindi siya bobo. She had that mental capacity to learn and to understand. But, here's the thing. There are some things that she can never learn anymore. Why? The reason is because her body has already adapted to the way that she lived. How so? Because remember when we are exercising, okay, laugh. I'm talking about exercise, but I'm the one who is fat. But let's just use it an example. So remember in exercising, your muscles grow. Why? Because they are always being used in your exercise. You have big, strong biceps. Why? Because the muscles are always contracting in and outward. So, similarly, but in the opposite way, if you do not use that muscles, then you will lose them or they will become thinner. So, similar in her brain, since Jenny did not use that part of her brain for a long time, then her body slowly changed, slowly adapted. It's like her body says that, oh, we don't use that part of our body. So why do we need to put some nutrients there? Oh, again, remember, she was treated not good or maltreated. She was undeveloped physically, meaning to say she was not and based on her living conditions, she was not getting the correct nutrients for her age. And sidetrack a bit, when she was found, even though she was 13 years old, she has a body of a 6 years old. Even though her age is 13, her body was only of that of 6 years old. And not because she has a genetic malfunction like dwarfism or giantism, katulad ni Dagul, for example only, ng dwarfism. No, she has no condition like that. She only has that kind of body, a body of a 6 years old, because she was so malnourished. Okay, so going back. So again, the body was saying, oh, we don't need that part. We're not even using that part at all for 13 long years. So why do we need to keep putting some nutrients when we can give those really important nutrients to other parts such as the lungs? They need more power, they need more energy, they need more nutrients. The heart, it needs more energy to keep living, and so on and so forth. So that's why slowly the part of her brain that is in charge for linguistics was becoming much smaller until it completely disappeared. That's why she was able to learn words, but she is unable to construct sentences. So here we have a picture of a neglected 3-year-old child. So here is the normal child brain, and here is the extremely neglected. And based on the living conditions of Jenny, she is extremely neglected. So as we can see, the first thing that we can notice is the size. This is much bigger than normal one. And second is the brain cells. As you can see, the black parts are the gaps, the spaces. So there is only little spaces in the normal. While in the neglected, there are so many blank space. Why? Because the muscle or the brain tissues were already shrinking. Maybe of two reasons. One, they were not being used. And two, because of extreme neglect, that person was not getting the proper amount of nutrients. And here's one more. Mind you, this is only 3 years old. Jenny was 13. So just imagine how small, how deformed her brain was. And yet she was still able to learn. So that's a good thing. But since it was so small or so deformed already, she had limits. Yes, she was curious. Yes, she was motivated. But because of her lifestyle, she had, and her body adapting to her lifestyle. Why? Because of course the body wants to survive, survival of the fittest, adaptation, learning how to cope up with the environment. So she lost some certain abilities. So it's like evolution. Or remember, necessity, mother of invention. So we created something because we need it, and now the body needs to survive, and the body will do everything to survive, even losing some abilities. Oh, remember, there's a saying that a person who exercises regularly, if that person stops, then that person easily gets fat. Daw. So why? The reason is because they exercise regularly, so they burn energy. And that energy goes to the muscles. Now, if they suddenly stop for a period of time, then the body will think, oh, we don't need to put these nutrients anymore to the muscles. Where do they need to put it? To the one catching the food. To the stomach. Why? Because the stomach needs to have much nutrients to, one, absorb the incoming food, nutrients, and two, to grow in order to have a much more bigger capacity as well. So it's just a matter of adaptation. Jenny adapted in a way that she lost some abilities. The trade-off is, yes, she lost that abilities, but she was able to live up to the age of 13. At least she is still alive, or she is still breathing. But in terms of language, she lost the ability to speak language. What she has are only words. Okay, so continuing the video.
And the earlier this neglect begins, and the longer it carries on, the worse the damage will be. Starved of stimulation, Jeannie's brain had simply not developed the capacity for language. And now that she was a teenager, she would never be able to learn. Despite this, Jeannie continued to be a close part of everyone's life. But there was more trouble ahead.
Children have to belong to somebody when they grow up, and she was still a child, and she needed a family to belong to. So that's what we would have liked, a family that she could belong to. And that's not what happened, unfortunately. What did happen is about the worst outcome I think we would have envisioned.
On her 18th birthday, Jeannie moved back with her mother Irene into the house in which she had been so terribly abused. But after only a few weeks, it was clear that Irene couldn't cope. From here, Jeannie was moved into state care with terrible consequences.
I was a student, and And people wouldn't listen to me. People who needed to intervene did not listen to me. And so I spent lots and lots of time on the phone pleading with people to intervene and save this person who had the worst experience of deprivation and isolation in all recorded medical history.
Jeannie moved from home to home, sometimes with the very people who served as her therapists. This potential conflict of interests raised tensions among the many people involved in her life, and a tug of war erupted over the child. As Jeannie's condition deteriorated, Irene decided that Susan Curtis and the other academics had become too close to Jeannie. A lawsuit followed.
I went from being asked to be her guardian to 1 week later being prevented from seeing her or phoning her. And ever since then, I've been prevented from having any contact at all. So, although I have lots of, I'm still a scientist, I'm still interested in knowing things about her language now and all kinds of interesting things I would like to pursue academically. Primarily, I would just like to see her.
Now, a ward of the court, Jeannie lives in an adult care home somewhere in Los Angeles, prevented from seeing the people who once meant so much to her.
Okay, so that's the ending of the story of Jenny. So, like in the certain parts, like in the last parts of the video, as I have said, though Jenny was curious, was learning words, she lost. She really lost. She is no longer able to learn language. And remember, language are not just words. They are grammatically constructed sentences in order to convey your messages. So it must be grammatically correct, also be able to use in a social context as well. So Jenny, as shown in the video, had a rough time, and now, as you can see, she is in a just adult care and unable to learn. In the end, she really was unable to learn language anymore. So she is the best example for a person, or what will happen to a person if they would miss a critical period in their life. So a person is unable to learn language if they miss a critical period. Why? Based on the case of Jenny, because of how the body would adapt. Maybe they might lose the ability, or they might have a hard time because the brain cells, the nerve cells, or the brain matter are shrinking. Why? Because they are not being used, they are not being exercised. The simple speaking, the simple thinking of words, you're already exercising your brains. That's why we have the term brainstorming. So you're exercising your brains. So that's our lesson for today, the critical period hypothesis. So I hope you learned the lesson, hope you learned many things, and thank you. Stay tuned for the next video, and goodbye.